Good morning Year 6 and welcome to Wednesday's Home Learning Journey lesson. And today's really important because today we're going to plan our final descriptive setting. So it's going to be your final piece of writing. And like a final piece in any of our writing, we're going to use everything we've learnt so far over the last 2 to 3 weeks, and we're going to use that in our writing. So you're going to definitely need your success criteria along with this plan. But this plan is really important because if we do a really good plan, then we're going to do a really good final piece of writing. Now for our plan today, we are going to pick one of the descriptive settings, one of these 4 descriptive settings below to write about. So your first task is you need to have a really good think and pick one of these descriptive settings to describe. So you could pick Rivendell, the Elven Palace in the Hidden Valley, and that's going to be a really positive, enchanting setting. It's going to be a nice place. Our characters are going to enjoy being there. You could pick the Goblin Tunnels underneath the Misty Mountains, and that is going to be the opposite. It's going to be a negative setting. Our characters are not going to enjoy being there at all. You could also pick the dark depths of the Forest of Mirkwood. And again, a bit like the Goblin Tunnels, we're not going to enjoy ourselves too much in the dark depths of the Forest of Mirkwood. Or you might write a really positive example of Mirkwood. However, I think it would be good to imagine a dark, dense, horrible, scary forest. And then you could pick the Dragon's Lair in the Lonely Mountain, which would also be quite a frightening place. So as you can see, we've got 3 quite negative settings to write about, or you have a positive one that you could write about. So your first job is to pause this video, think really carefully about which setting you could use some amazing description for, and all that amazing figurative language we've learnt. And then at the top of your page, I want to you to write out the setting you've picked. So pause the video now and write out the setting you will pick. Now that you've picked your setting, I would like you to, 1, write at the top of the page, which you should have done by now, and then draw 4 big boxes on the rest of your page in your learning journey books. This should be in your learning journey books. And these 4 boxes, although they're very small on mine, they should take up the whole of your page. So you need to spread your page into 4 boxes. 1, 2, 3, 4. So, please pause the video and split your page into 4 boxes. Now that you've split your page into 4 boxes, you need to think about what you're writing, your setting. So, to start off with, we're going to think about the 5 senses. So, put 5 senses as a mini title. And then you need to think about, what can you hear in these goblin tunnels? Well, what do you hear? I hear the sound of screeching. Okay, the sounds of screeching goblins. Okay, and you might go into more detail than mine, but you might be able to hear the sound of screeching goblins. What might you see? Well, it might be quite tricky to see actually, because it's so dark. So I see the blurry, because it's dark, the blurry cavern. Filled with gigantic boulders. Okay? And there you can see I've written it now. I see the blurry cavern filled with gigantic boulders. And then I also want you to think about the other 5 senses. So, what can you taste? So, I taste. What can you smell? And what can you feel or touch? So you need to think about those 3 and put that in your first 5 senses box. You should definitely have enough room because these 4 boxes should take up the whole of your page. I've just done a smaller version so you can see. What figurative language could you use? So you might want to write a simile. So a simile. And what would your simile be about? So maybe you'd write a simile about how dark it was, because you've already said that the cavern was blurry. So the cave were as dark as coal. So the caves were as dark as coal. Could you think of a metaphor, perhaps for what you taste? Or could you just think of a metaphor to describe what else you might see? So you might see something else. Could you think of another? Because you're going to see lots of things. You're not just going to see a blurry cavern filled with gigantic boulders. What metaphor could you write? And then also, could you write a piece of personification? What personification could we write? So we need to think about all those things. And if you're really, really thinking, you could think of some onomatopoeia. But maybe you're going to put that in your adventurous vocabulary section instead. Because, again, although we're going to be using lots of figurative language, we also want to be using lots of adventurous vocabulary to describe. Okay, now you need to think about how would speech express the character's feelings. Often, Bilbo wishes he was in his hobbit hole. So you might write about that. You might write about how Bilbo wishes he's in his hobbit hole. I wish I was in my hobbit hole. And then how might Bilbo say it? Well, he might complain. Complained Bilbo. So as we can see, you could think about some speech that might go into there. And I've done that very quickly, and I've just thought of a very basic and quite boring example. But how could speech express your character's feelings? And you really need to think quite hard about that one. How might the other dwarves complain? How might they groan? What might happen to them that would make them very upset or grumpy? Because obviously these goblin tunnels aren't a nice place to be. Okay? And then finally, we need to think of some adventurous vocabulary. So if I was going to talk about the situation the characters were in, I might say it was calamitous, which means actually that they were in great danger, or that is not a very nice place to be. If I was talking about the attitudes or the feelings of our characters, I might say they were being pessimistic, which is another great word I could use. And you can think of all different adventurous vocabulary for your story. So I'm only going to put a couple of examples of the kinds of words I would expect to see in your descriptive writing. However, you can choose your own adventurous vocabulary, and you can use the internet, you can use a dictionary to help you. We all know how to find synonyms. So what I want you to do now is I want you to have a look at a couple of my examples, and then I want you to go away and fill in the 4 sections of your plan. Remember to pick one of the 4 settings above and then fill in these 4 sections. Good luck, and I really can't wait to read your plans. Remember, the more detail you go into in your plan, the easier it's going to be for you to write tomorrow. So please spend some good time on these plans. It's imperative, it's really important that you spend time planning your work.